next slide, please, in the back. Thanks. Ardian, Richard. Great, gentlemen. Great to have you here with us. Darius, great that you're doing this panel. We've known each other for a while now,
Yeah.
with your work with STL Partners. Final session for the day. So, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So yeah, final session. Good to see still a few faces lingering on. So what we've heard about throughout the afternoon track today is a little bit about the nature, I suppose, of the opportunity in network APIs. Does it look similar to CPaaS? Where are the bigger revenue streams, identity versus quality on demand? What we're going to be trying to talk a little bit about is actually practically what can telco operators and their partners do to try and achieve some of that and capture some of that addressable market. So we'll be talking about some of the practical steps of how you drive real change in the telco to do something differently, I suppose, because those, and looking out of the faces, I think there are a few who've been in the industry for a long time, may have seen the GSMA's One API program before and said, well, are we really going to be able to make something of APIs now? What's going to be different? So we want to talk a little bit about what's going to be different this time for the telcos. And a quick introduction to myself. I'm Darius. I'm going to be your moderator today. I'm one of the directors at STL Partners, and we're a boutique research and consulting firm focused on telecoms and technology. So network APIs is a big theme for us and will be a big theme going forward. But I wanted to hand over to the panel first to introduce themselves. If we start from left to right, Ardian, if we start with you.
All right. Thank you, Darius. So first of all, thanks. It is a privilege for me to be here. I'm Ardian from Telin. Actually, Telin is the subsidiaries of Telkom Indonesia. So basically, currently I'm handling for managing of digital product development. So CPaaS is one of the product for voice mobility service that I'm currently managing for building go-to-market strategy, how to monetizing, as well as to define the product vision that CPaaS stay relevant in terms of the market competition and business model. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. And then we've got Richard.
Hi, everyone. Richard Atherton. I'm responsible for BT's CCaaS portfolio and smart messaging for the UK market and the global market. We've been responsible, or my team has been responsible for taking the telco part or the different parts of our portfolio through quite a lot of change over the last 20 years. So we've moved the portfolio on from a lot of the legacy products towards cloud products, CCaaS products, smart messaging products. So network APIs is another step for us, and obviously it's been my team's responsibility to make sure that we monetize that and we successfully have a good global business model. So this is going to be no exception, but it doesn't mean it's not an interesting challenge.
Perfect. And Joaquin, back for round two. I don't know if there's anything to your introduction you would add this time.
No, just Joakim Sorelius, working at Ericsson. I've been most of my career working in our network business. Now since 18 months, I've been working with our acquisition of Vonage and how to bring network APIs to market.
Perfect. So we've been doing a lot of research in the network API space as STL, and we've been speaking to a number of the leading and kind of tier 2 and 3 operators and altnets that are trying to make a business out of this. And one of the first questions that they have once they've committed to the fact that there is a possible opportunity, and we have just been through a big afternoon saying that we think there's a big opportunity. So let's take that kind of as a given. One of the first questions that we get is, how do we need to organize as a business to actually make money from this? What teams need to be involved in an API program? Because as I think in the previous panel they mentioned, there's wholesale, enterprise line of business, technology, product, all of these different teams, regulatory, etc., that kind of need to be involved to try and make a business of APIs. So they kind of ask, well, how do we need to structure ourselves to actually start and begin to scale? And I believe, Richard, you mentioned in kind of our planning that there's a lot of teams and it becomes very complex very quickly to actually make a business and to be scaled. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit to kick us off about your experience trying to scale that.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, it's a common conundrum as how do you approach a business when you really don't yet know how you can scale, how you can reach the scale, and how you can monetize it. So I think from experience, what we found is starting with a small, concise team, but representing all of the business units that you just mentioned, enterprise, wholesale, even serving the internal market, which has been mentioned several times this afternoon as well. It's always a big question mark of where you start. I think the key is you have to find use cases which are going to scale eventually, because if you don't, you simply won't be able to get a return on the investment of all the time you've put in it. So in our experience, trying to build a very large team across a telco for a capability that isn't yet scaled is really difficult. So a small, dedicated team, sometimes taking experts in from other businesses that know a lot more about network APIs, for example, would be a good place to start. And once you have started to speak to enterprises, you really have a good understanding of what those use cases are, and you can start to understand where the scale is going to come in the marketplace. Then you can start to evangelize that message across the telco business, but you have to prove it first.
So is it fair to say then that starting group across those different business units has to be very customer-centric, customer-focused, and that should be the core of that team, effectively?
Yeah, it should always start with the customer. If we, no matter where we start, whether we start from a legal perspective, from a technical perspective, if we're starting internally, we're probably making a mistake from the beginning. The conversation has got to start with our customers. And, we've taken a lot of those really large enterprises already through transformations of their own. So we've taken them through, just normal, voice telephony, through to using very complex applications throughout their business. So this is another evolution for them. But if we don't ask them where they're going first, everything we build will be unable to scale and unable to serve them.
And Ardian, is it slightly different for you? Because of course, Telin, it's not a legacy or incumbent operator. It looks slightly different, feels slightly different in terms of the teams that you might need to be involved with, or becoming or trying to drive more customer centricity. Do you face different challenges to those that Richard might?
Yeah, well, basically, I think let me share a bit how our experience, how we built from the scratch in collaboration with Telkomsel as our sister company. Because in this case here, for Telco Network API is interconnect with the CPaaS platform from Telin. Basically, for the initiate ideation, the Telkomsel in this case here with very dominant in the market. Currently in Indonesia, we have around 100 million mobile subscriber, and 8 million fixed internet subscriber. So first thing first, we providing the specific team for data analytic platform, because for this huge subscriber, the data analytic unit need to have the capability to structuring the data. So for example, for Telkomsel, right, at least operator need to have capability to structuring the big two categories of data. Let's say the demographic data and the customer digital behavior data. So for example, the demographic data, we can easier get the data from our core network, for example, location-based and gender, for example, or also age, for example, like this. That's for the demographic data. Well, for the customer digital behavior, like what is the customer usually they browsing, and what is the smartphone type that they use. This data actually from the big data unit need to structuring and identify before we can exposing to the platform to monetizing. First thing first, big data analytic unit need to have in this case here. And then the important thing is the product team. Product team is at least the one who have the vision to define the product roadmap based on the customer needs, something like this. Because when we talk about telco network API, right, like it or not, the use case is quite variant. In Indonesia specifically, in our region, we're more focusing on three first use cases first. One is the location-based services. Second is the telco credit score. The third one is the mobile number verification. Why we come up with those three? Because customer is there, customer is needs. So to answer your question, the minimum structure of team, product team and big data analytic team will collaborating with the business development team. Business development team, the one who capturing the business case and the business plan to validate that our investment is quite meet with the ROI later on if we come up with those three network API use cases. Last but not least, actually marketing sales and customer success manager. Customer success manager is also quite important role because, you know, again, I think in the morning also discussing when telco already exposed the API, that's only the connectivity or plain API. We need to be tailored. We need to be create the application to become more easily to expose to the business owner. The customer success manager in this case here need to educate the market, need to enable the market that, hey, Mr. Customer, this API can be created use case A, B, C, D that can answering your pain point. So in summary that those unit, need to have the cross-functional team to be more structured to answering the go-to-market strategy.
So the important teams, kind of from that initial stage being, of course, having the customer success manager that brings the perspective of the customer, can help scale in the customer, but then also having kind of your business development manager, your product manager, and I think importantly, that data and analytics capability, or someone who can ensure that you've got that single view of the customer and information that gets access from that API. That's pivotal to make a business of this, is having the data structure underneath that will actually enable this information to be shared.
Yeah, that's right.
Perfect.
Can I just add a short reflection? I think clearly it comes, as we understand, network API is a super multidisciplinary activity, and you need many different competencies, and very few CSPs operators are in the position to start a totally new business unit with all those competencies. So you need to probably, in the majority of cases, start small, bring in competence from different parts, like you explained. I think it's also important to remember that the day-to-day targets of each different function in the big operator might conflict with the network API target. So you should not forget to align the targets across the organization so that network API has a chance to be successful from a business perspective as well.
It's almost like we prepared, because that's followed on next to the next set of questions, right? So when we talk about KPIs, I think it's a really interesting narrative, because a few have mentioned, is revenues the right KPI to look at the beginning? Do different teams have different KPIs? And especially, I think, in the wake of the new JV and the new co, if you've got more of a wholesale relationship between the shareholder telco and the new joint venture, what KPIs might the joint venture hold itself to? Is it revenue or is it something else? So maybe, Joachim, if I start with you, where do you think KPIs metrics should be heading in terms of scaling this as a business?
We should remember that we are really still, unfortunately, in early days when it comes to network APIs. So, remember that developers, like I said before, they don't really know so much about networks. The most thing they know about mobile networks is that they are crappy. And we heard somebody talk here also earlier about, the performance between Wi-Fi and mobile networks and so on. So that's sort of in the mindset. So I think important metrics in the beginning is things like reliability and performance, latency for the APIs, so that we don't, again, prove to the world that the mobile networks are not good, right, for developers. They have a lot of capabilities, and we have to prove that they are good as well. So I would start there and not over-rotate too much on the financials in the early days, but clearly these metrics will have to evolve over time. But I'll stop there and see what are the other thoughts there.
Yeah, I wonder, Richard, from your perspective, do you feel, I suppose, pressure from the top down for the telco to drive immediate value, ROI? Because I think we mentioned the JV, the new JV, it's it's not necessarily to drive dividend, and it's not well, it's for profit, but not to drive a significant margin. Whereas telcos have historically been seen as a dividend stock, and they need to provide quarter-on-quarter returns to shareholders. So, from your perspective, are you allowed the freedom to think about different KPIs, or is where's the money kind of the thing that you get asked quite frequently by senior management?
Yeah, it's where's the money, exactly. So I think I would agree, but probably in a different order in terms of the KPIs that you mentioned. So revenue, I would always put number one, mainly because that drives you to make the right decisions in almost every single case. If that's always your primary KPI, you will have to drive your availability figures, because without them, you can't earn your revenue anyway. The faster you achieve a really high level of availability, the faster you're going to be well known in the market as a leader, then you're going to drive more revenue, etc. So revenue for me means you've done a lot of things right. Yeah? So you've started to think about the units of usage, for example. You've got that correct. You've started to think about the use cases that your customers need, and they are starting to drive usage against the unit of transaction that you chose. You know, that you've got the right internal costs in place. So, for example, that you haven't immediately scaled up your capability without being able to fill a pipeline and to be able to sell enough to your customers. So the revenue and the margin that you're making should really be a pressure right from the very beginning, because it generally drives the right decisions everywhere else. But availability, once you're actually moving forward and you can start to forecast your revenue and you see driving demand, availability is then just as important, because that really does allow you to differentiate in the marketplace. And it's not just the quality of your network, it's the quality of all of the teams supporting that network as well, and the fact that they have actually a good understanding of the product that you're now selling.
And just to touch on a theme raised by the previous panel, the notion of B2B2C versus kind of the more B2B use cases and APIs, do you feel like there are different KPIs that may be put on those different businesses? Is one because it's more tied to private networking or tied to other services around enablement? You know, are there different KPIs than revenue, or is it treated similarly to the B2B2C side?
I think historically, whenever we've gone through these types of transformations, the B2C market drives much faster transformation, because it's, you know, B2B is a lot more static. You're generally dealing with internal applications or internal communications. B2C, you're at the mercy of whatever's happening in the market, and that can mean, you know, you have lots and lots of unexpected events, and your product has to be able to work with those, which means use cases can diverge very rapidly from what you initially thought they were going to be. So you learn more from B2C, you'll drive more revenue from it, but it's also riskier. So you do have to have a different approach, but basically a product will always work best if you address both markets.
And Ardian, from your perspective, because KPIs, trying to shift away from dividends to growth and trying to think about ways to look at, I suppose, the market beyond revenues comes down a lot to people and culture, and how do you change the culture of a business as part of, you know, trying to make a business from APIs and scale that. And I know when we were doing the prep, you had some opinions on the role of people and culture in trying to shift the KPIs, trying to shift the way that we talk about scaling this as a business, and trying to shift how we actually kind of make some practical steps, I suppose, to change.
Well, thanks. So basically, when we talk about the KPI, right, actually, yes, beside the resources and people, I think I agree with the previous speaker that revenue is still the one of the important role, right? So how we identify and measure our KPI, well, we are aggressively to selling the telco network API. Basically, I would like to share one of the example why one of the use case mobile number verification is quite important for us as a telco. The one use case that we measure actually, this business actually will compensate how declining the A2P SMS in the telco, because the A2P SMS is time to time is declining. So manufacturer actually last morning, somebody from InfoBip also mentioned how the fraud messaging is become happening, and also increasing the price, especially in Asia. You know, the A2P SMS rate is quite high. So it is trigger how the business owner, hyperscaler, OTT, they need to find the alternative. Even a telco now have difficulties because we decreasing a lot, around double-digit percentage of this situation. So to measure this initiation for the telco network IPI, at least one, we can compensate the declining of the A2P. That's the one that we need to measure out the KPI from the revenue perspective. But from the people perspective, actually, yeah, because this is how the telco need to transform, basically, from our legacy to be more digital, right? When we talk about the transformation, in this case here, I want to capture in the more three aspect. One, people, process, and technology in this case here. The people itself, actually, there are more on the how we change our mindset. So in this case here, during the transformation, right, the mindset on the people need to have more on the keep continuous learning and be innovative, and as well as how the collaboration from the cross function is must. We avoid the shallow management because, you know, when we talk about delivering the telco API more on the digital, collaboration and co-creation is a must. That's why we define the objective and key result, OKR, when we deploy one or two use cases. So in the OKR, we clearly measure what is the objective, what is the key result. And then that's for the people. For the business, for the process itself, basically, agile methodologies cannot be avoided in this case here to deliver kind of the services, right? So with the agile methodology, we need to be more boldly to be iterative, iteration solution to deliver to the market, to be more fast, go to market with the continuous integration and continuous delivery, CI/CD. So when we develop kind of the new services, so we can expediting implement it to the market and then do the iteration. So in this case here, how we measure in terms of KPI, again, OKR will be defined clearly. Lastly, about the technology, I think technology is already pretty much there. How we implementing more on the native cloud API to utilizing microservices to deploy in the application layer on the telco API. Yeah.
And so just to double click on that, because you mentioned, and as we've spoken about before, there's a need for external education and awareness and training, I suppose, of developers, etc. But there's actually a big internal upskilling piece that we need to do to both change the mindset of the people within the organization, but also help move towards CI/CD and continuous integration and development processes. And that's all transformation that the telco has to undergo to make a success of this business. So I was wondering again if you could give some practical steps of, you know, beyond buying that from a vendor and trying to say, well, we've bought telco cloud practices and they're going to upskill us. How do you drive that kind of change within a business to go from more of a waterfall process approach to the more agile CI/CD software-driven approach, I suppose?
Well, actually, again, this is no right or wrong, right? So for me, actually, based on the experience when we build something of digital application, actually depend on which stage that our company is ready in terms of transformation. I mean, if our organization still on the new phase and the business also still in the early adopter, I think in terms of how we enabling our resources can be do like a strategic partnership with the technology provider. We need to learn fast, we need to deploy fast, and then do the iteration. But if our organization already pretty sure that, okay, already passed in the early stage, I mean, already in the pretty sure go to market, I mean, we can develop our in-house resource capabilities, right? Because again, the challenge for telco, basically, as you mentioned, Mostly, telco is still focusing on the infrastructure with the waterfall model. But now in Telin and Telkom Group, exactly, we try to change from waterfall to be more agile development. So we create the ad hoc team. I mean, we separate per squad team. Every squad team have the mission, and then organization also provide the trap leader. Trap leader in this case here, the one who advise every squad team on every weekly basis. So trap leader in this case here, they are not necessary to have a straightforward direction. They like just an advisor, because agile development actually is bottom-up approach, right? So does every squad team need to, have alignment weekly basis with the trap alignment to get some advisor that is there any blocking, is there any obstacle. So trap alignment in this case here consists of every unit. So in this case here we can give some valuable insight, valuable solution that will be more easily to cover the obstacle. Yeah.
And Joaquin, from your perspective, you know, because a lot around CI/CD and the move towards agile is something that operators have looked to technology partners to support them on, both from the hyperscaler side and the network equipment provider side. So from your perspective, within the context of network APIs, you know, what is Ericsson's role and I suppose the JV's role in supporting telcos in adopting some of those better practices? And a follow-up question, I guess, being where should they be looking to build in-house skills themselves and try and upskill themselves and build in-house skills and capabilities versus should they outsource and look to partners, I suppose, to help them accelerate part of the market?
So you mentioned the word culture there a little bit earlier as well, and I mean, culture is also built on the success of the venture that you're trying to create. And we also talked in the morning, I think, about, or earlier today, about, you know, the culture in the telco industry to do everything yourself. And Ericsson also has such a culture as we'd rather make than buy usually because, you know, it's our engineering pride. Now, when it comes to network APIs, I mean, and to actually get some quick successes, I think in the beginning, different parties need to focus on what they're good at and and make sure that they find partners and collaboration where maybe they're not so advanced in the beginning. So without going into detail exactly who should do who, I think that you should carefully consider what do you want to do in-house and what do you want to leave to a partner. When it comes to the network equipment part, of course, Ericsson is happy to run core networks as a service for an operator, but in most cases, an operator wants to have that in-house and wants to control that, but then also has to learn the cloud practices that makes it possible to deploy new services at scale and at speed.
And I think it was Jakob in the first panel mentioned for this to work truly as an ecosystem, everyone needs to do what they're good at and stop trying to do everything. And I wondered, from your perspective, in the kind of network API monetization realm, what is it that the telcos are good at that they should focus on? Where are they strong? And then, Richard, I'll ask you the same and see, do the views align?
See if we align. I think with telcos, operators are good at many things, but what they're particularly good at, I think, is their network and how to operate and run and maintain their network and how to build it. And of course, also they're very good at knowing what their large and most important customer needs. So those are the two aspects where I feel that they excel, if you would like it.
Thanks. I have to agree with that now, don't I? Yeah. No, I mean it's true. I mean where we should excel. We don't always, but we absolutely should. Is the fact that we are the closest entity towards the customers in many cases. These enterprise customers, which again, some of which have been with us as telcos for quite a long time through lots of series of transformations. So. I mean, if you ask sort of anyone in the marketplace, the two things that come out are that customer centricity and network. That's always the things that are associated with telcos. I think one of the things that's underestimated, and it's funny because I've heard a lot of conversations today, and a lot of the things that have been said, and it's almost like how are we going to drag telcos in through this? Because we're reluctant, we're digging our heels in, we're late to the party, etc., right? So being late to the party isn't necessarily a bad thing in some cases. And arriving at the right time at the party is probably a lot better, yeah? And I think we've learned from a lot of our mistakes about how we can transform where we failed from the past. And I think our ability to learn from those mistakes in bringing in new technologies and knowing, you know, exactly which of those technologies are going to work at scale for our customers is something that, you know, we have done very well, which is why we're still around after so many years.
And I think that longevity piece probably can't be undervalued, I guess, where telcos have been around for a long time. They move data from A to B very securely for a long time without breaches, without issues, and that is a core strength, I suppose, that can be monetized. And I guess in the context of network APIs and the selling of information effectively, it becomes even more important as a capability to have. And so what about on the flip side then, the areas where telcos maybe they have gaps where they should look to partners to fill either on the technology or the commercial go-to-market side? Do you feel like there are some core areas within the network API opportunity that the partnerships will be essential?
Yeah, definitely.
Here we should let you start.
No, I mean, we've seen this, and again, this is, if I look back at the transformations that we've done, and this is going to be no exception, we need technical expertise, and you can't simply invent that within a telco community. We have to bring in partners in order to be able to bring our engineering teams up to speed to be able to deal with, you know, a transformation of this type and the ability to use our networks for something that we haven't used them for before. Where we do have the expertise in is building commercial models, for example. So monetizing is really, really important here. So bringing in technical expertise, speaking to the technicians, but also discussing with them, okay, how are we going to make money out of this? At what units are we going to sell it? How flexible are we going to make contracts, etc. Those types of things have to be discussed between commercial teams with experience and engineers brought in from outside of telcos that can give us, you know, a really good insight as to exactly how the technology works.
One of the points I think it was raised in the last panel was the move towards more vertical specialism and the need for more vertical expertise. And we've also spoken a lot about today, you know, the need for global aggregation and the fact that developers may want to deliver global apps and they don't want to work with many, many telcos. But what we haven't spoken about so much is actually the need for regional specialism, because in some markets they may behave completely different to other markets, and there may be local regulations that are very different to a different one, even within Europe, for example. So I wonder, how important is it for the telco to also bring regional credibility and expertise as well as bringing the technical? And maybe Ardian, if I start with you, because I think you're maybe one of the few from the APAC region here as well, so bringing a bit of that regional skill.
Well, actually, I'm still pretty much in line with Richard, right? The important thing is actually how to monetizing, how to make a strategy go to market. That's the important thing for telco. But specifically, the product evangelist technical part that regarding how we build, actually, telco at least, you know, need to have capability as the, product owner or architecture in this case here. So the role in this case here need to have the capability, at least they know what they want. Regarding the one who developing, the one who building, actually, we can approach so many developer in the market. We can do the strategic partnership. We can do the third-party developer that very, very focused to build something like this. But in terms of the regional expertise in this case here, at least the product architecture, we need to have our own. While more on the, go-to-market and monetizing need to heavily, in this case here, to be more focused. Yeah.
And Richard, I think you had some views in the prep call as well around regulation and some of the new regulations, I think, especially coming in around AI and the telco, again, around hyperscalers and where you can and can't put certain amounts of data. So yeah, from your perspective, being able to navigate some of those regional nuances, let's say, how important is that for scaling this as a business?
Yeah, it's really important. I mean, there are, You know, there are local regulations which have affected us in the past for things like number identification, that kind of thing. But, you know, in the area of network APIs, you know, AI is going to be running in parallel to this. And when you look at use cases, they're going to be, you know, mixed, and they're going to be highly involved in it. Now, the AI Act, which came in a month ago across Europe, means that each party involved in this has a legal responsibility to identify AI at every single step of the process to the person that's using it. Now, you can imagine if we're talking about aggregators, we're talking about telco providers, infrastructure providers, developers, enterprise customers, wholesale customers. There's a lot of different entities there who are using this capability, and AI is going to be intertwined throughout. So if any of those parties get it wrong and fall foul of the AI Act, there can be quite large ramifications, exactly the same as there always have been for data sharing and data processing. So Telco's responsibility to our customers has always been to make sure that what they're signing up for is legally correct, is compliant with the local market. And I think with the entrance of AI into this arena as well, we're going to have even more responsibility from a contracting point of view.
And does that become even more complicated when you do look to aggregators? And again, I'm thinking about the JV here, which is going to take on some of the burden of contracting and making sure that that's abstracted away from what the developer has to worry about. Will you then take on the compliance burden of making sure that you're not giving information to people that you shouldn't, or that data isn't residing somewhere that it shouldn't? Or, you know, I guess, will that be a job of the JV in standardizing that contracting side, or is that going to be shared between the local telco and the JV as the aggregator? And again, could be broader than just the JV, any aggregator here.
Yeah. No, but I mean, in the discussion leading up to the JV and to any commercial negotiations around acquiring network APIs, it becomes very clear that the regulator in the different countries, they see the CSPs, and especially the sort of the main CSP in that country, like BT in the UK, as a guarantor for making sure that the network APIs are used in a, you know, in a legal way, and also, of course, an ethical way. And absolutely, there's definitely a need for, and that's being done through TM Forum and other organizations, to clearly articulate what responsibilities lie where in the value chain, so that there can be no unclarity on who is responsible for vetting the enterprise that uses the CSP services, or what it's used for, and things like that.
Perfect. So we've got a few minutes left. I don't know if there are any questions from the audience before I go to my last question. Any hands? No? Perfect. In which case, you know, the event is run by the CPaaS Acceleration Alliance, so I thought it would be remiss not to mention CPaaS in the context of some of this as well. Are there any learnings that the industry can take in trying to monetize network APIs from having monetized CPaaS, CCaaS, etc.? And again, Richard, I might start with you, because I know that's I think the history that you've come from is trying to monetize some of those within BT. So are there any learnings that you can take on, you know, how to organize the telco business around network APIs from the CPaaS business?
Yeah, I mean, it actually comes back to one of the things that we mentioned before, that we took a big learning from how messaging was taken into the portfolio and how it was sold to different use cases. You know, the reason it was really successful is because we again started with the use cases, and we started with what we knew would be very large use cases. So and that can be in healthcare, it can be insurance, logistics is a really key one that we've heard before today. I mean, the fact that you drive a difference in behavior of people using logistics services. So we talked about the ability for drivers to know that someone is going to be there to receive a parcel. Yeah, all of that makes the experience better for the consumer. It means they buy more. They will do even more online shopping, which drives more communication, makes more revenue. So being part of that cycle and knowing the business that you're part of is vital. So again, it comes back to the use cases. That was vital for CPaaS. It will be vital for network APIs.
And Joachim, your perspective, again, I guess the narrative of Vonage having come a little bit from the CPaaS world as well. Are there any learnings that you're trying to apply now to the scaling of the network APIs market?
Yeah, plenty. I mean, the ones that were mentioned here are really important. I think also the learning that engagement with the demand side is super important, can never be underestimated. There can be a lot of supply, but the demand doesn't automatically come. We really need to engage with the end users and what their needs are and how to provide what they need.
And last but not least, Ardian, from your perspective, learnings from having tried to do this in the CPaaS space.
Yeah. Before we integrate with the network IPR, right? So basically, the CPaaS can only deliver the customer engagement platform. I mean, can deliver the omni-channel like SMS, voice, WhatsApp, RCS, and so on. So with this integrate with the network IPR, right? So now we have another value proposition when we expose to the enterprise customer, because for example, one of use cases that we are piloting project in Asia Pacific, we enabling CPaaS with the automation location-based services. So before location-based is only a private network in the telco, just only exposed in the SMS channel, for example. But with the CPaaS, we can utilizing the telco network IPR, let's say location-based, then exposing to the market based on the preference channel that customer want. So let's say location-based delivered by WhatsApp, by RCS, by LAN, whatever channel that customer preference. So we tried piloting project in Telkomsel. It's only two-month pilot project. We open location-based services that interconnect with a multi-channel. So we had very good result. I mean, during this pilot project, only in 2 months, so we got 30 enterprise customers onboarding. And the result itself, we had a good customer response, basically, because previously we only depend in the traditional channel. Now we open to be more omni-channel. So they can also increasing the customer rate and customer reachability, something like this. Yeah.
Perfect. So I guess just to finally summarize, there's a big focus on the demand side and understanding the demand side, both in terms of the use cases, the messaging and the proposition, and you need to get that right, but you also need to get the go-to-market channel correct. You need to use the channel that they actually use to access these services. And I think, again, we've spoken a lot throughout this whole day, I suppose, about the aggregators and the new JV, and can the telco go through the aggregator as a model? But the aggregator also then has to find the right distribution channels themselves and push through the vertical specialists, push through the regional specialists, etc., to build this as a market. So I think with that, we're out of time, and we'll hand back over to Rob, I think, to end the day. So thanks a lot for joining us.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Darius and team. Ivan.